Do men lead lives of quiet desperation? And I think that's a really important question for us to tackle.
Personally, for himself, I think he lived his life doing what he wanted to do. Because, I mean, he chose to go off in the woods, and it seems like after doing that, he got a better understanding of what life was supposed to be like. And even from the beginning, when he was protesting, he didn't have to do that, but he did that on his own choice. So I think that he lived his life the way he thought it should be lived.
Yeah, I agree, Carson. I think one of the most important things he did is when he didn't pay his taxes and he went to jail and made that stand, and he didn't just comply and submit to the Mexican-American War and pay his taxes and kind of just be like everyone else. And I feel like maybe a lot of men lead these lives that they aren't fulfilled in. But I mean, us being here today and talking about how we feel about that shows that we're not, people at this table aren't leading quiet lives, and that we're speaking out. So maybe not everyone, and I feel like there's tools around us so that we can have our voices be heard and maybe change the world in our own way.
It's easy to look back and say, oh, it was different then, right? But I think Quinn's right. I think Thoreau would today say, no, most people just go through their lives and follow the path they think they're supposed to follow. But I guess what I'm asking about the hypocrisy of it is can you break free of the path that society tells you you're supposed to follow? Your parents, or maybe you, have chosen to come to Hun, right? Because they saw that as giving you an advantage somehow, right? So it's in a way, being here is playing the game, not violating the rules of the game. Do you see what I mean? I think this question between Jack and Quinn, I think, is a really important one, which is, can we break free of the rules of society? If it's true that those rules push us into this desperation, this life that we don't really want to lead for ourselves, is school pushing us toward that? You all care way more about your grades than you do about what we learn in class, right? You've been trained to do that since you were little. So can you break out of that? Is it possible to break out of that?
The desperation in that quote, he might be saying some people are desperate to get out of their position, they don't like their job. Maybe they want to break free from society, but they were told they couldn't from a young age, like you said. It's implanted in their brain that they have to go to school, they have to get a job, start a family. But maybe some people are desperate to get out of that situation, but they just can't because they don't want to they're too afraid of being a failure.
I think one of the biggest factors in kind of going to school and going to college is money, because we live in a materialistic society. So you always want the best, everything or more than everyone else. And I think getting a good job is kind of the start to that, because then you'll have more money. So I think that's kind of what fuels the whole idea of our society, kind of.
Yeah, if you do break out, there's no way you can do something that's as successful. People want materials, and you can only get that through
success,
not happiness.
Wait, but how do you define success? Because for some people, success may be being really happy with everything they have, and other people, Zach was saying it for money. How do you define success?
I think the success that we define as a society is the success of how we do at this game. For example, if you become for example someone as rich as Bill Gates or Mark Zuckerberg, then you obviously have done really well in this game. You are successful. But as someone as Henry David Thoreau, who just sits in the woods and just clears his thoughts, writes a book, and does what he wants to do, then he is successful. So it's all about how you define. It's all about how you define success in your mind.
I feel like success creates happiness. If you are successful, then you're going to live a happier life. Because if you're unsuccessful, it leaves you with a lack of money, and then that creates a lack of other things.
Yeah, but you can be successful, you'd be making a lot of money, but just have to go to work every day and not be happy with what you're doing. Exactly. You can just be sitting behind a desk and not be happy, but you're still successful.
What do you give up in order to meet society's standard of success? When you think about what he says at the end of Walden, when he says, I learned this by my experiment. What did he say that he learned? What's his message after his experience?
I think he's trying to say, don't, break away. Don't, do what makes you happy. Because, when he was teaching in the school, and, when you said, he had to hit the kid with the ruler, he didn't like that, so he broke away from it, and he changed his ways. He didn't go with what society told him to do. He did what made him happy and what he thought was right.
I also feel it might be that he realized that we don't need all of these things, like the money or the success that everyone wants. And that while living in the woods, he realized this, that people, all they really need to do to be happy is just lead simple lives.
I can't really tell if he was happy though. Like, was he
Yeah,
happy there?
Exactly.
He's talking about how that you have to not cut yourself off, but do what you want to do to make you happy. But was he actually happy alone in this cabin when he was in love with this woman who didn't love him back, and then his brother died, right, of lockjaw? But was that actually the life that he lived, or was he just sitting quiet in desperation in his cabin? I don't know.
Well, it's like, I feel like it's hard to judge like how he like would view, like, because he wanted us to like follow like what we truly believed, and like it'd be hard to like judge like how he would like think of some people, because maybe some people would like to have a successful life even though if it leads to them like having a miserable life.
Well, that's what they're taught. See, I feel like as a kid, we're taught to believe that you do well in school, you get a good job, you make a lot of money, and then you live a happy life. But we don't realize that we're taught that money brings happiness, or money buys happiness. But really, I feel like once a lot of people get to that stage, they realize that actually, while they're spending all this time working, they're not really having fun. And that all this money, even though they have all this money, like they can buy anything they want, but you can't buy happiness.
So when you guys say like Thoreau thinks we should just go do what makes us happy, we don't know what really makes us happy. If all our life our parents taught us money makes happiness, we don't know what truly makes us happy until we like experience that. And I think that's what he's kind of saying, like we should experience it, like not just like say that's what makes me happy, I'm gonna go do that, because you don't really know, because that's what we've been taught. What do you think of that, Hannah?
Are you serious? No, I agree. I think that we are taught like that money makes you happy, and that it's hard to get out of that cycle and think differently if you're taught that your entire life.
So did Thoreau break out of that cycle?
I think he tried
He
to
tried,
when he yeah. went to go to the cabin and sort of rid himself of all his material things. And I think that's what made him happy, sort of releasing himself from society and how he thought that people were sort of interconnected and couldn't really escape. That was his way to escape, but I don't know if that's everyone's way to escape.
It's harder for us to break away, like now, these people have invested in us and we've invested in ourselves. Like parents have thrown a bunch of money, which they have worked for themselves, into schooling, and it's harder for us because, like personally, if I tried to break away, I'd feel guilty because my parents have thrown so much of their lives into myself, and I feel like I'm throwing that away.
I think it's a really good argument that you're making. It's like we're trapped, is what you're saying. Like there is no way out, because if you break free, you let down other people too, right? And like the consequences of breaking free are so great that we can't do it. Like we're stuck. And that's why he's saying the mass of men lead lives of quiet desperation. Like he knows that most people can't break out of that. But isn't he advocating changing the rules? Like in other words, what I'm saying is like, wouldn't he argue, like why do we have to have grades? Like why do we have to have school that has grades? Like if you change the system, like it doesn't mean you wouldn't go to school anymore. It just means that like the process of school wouldn't be the same. Do you understand what I mean? So it's sort of like I wonder about like the difference between like let's stay within the rules of the game and just not play, as opposed to let's change the rules of the game. Do you see what I mean?
How do you change the rules when everybody and everything that you've ever learned and everything in society, like the people who make the most money got the best grades and the best colleges, how do you change the rules when we see the rules work?
That's a good question, and answer that question. Like, what would Thoreau say about
I mean,
it?
I don't
That's,
think
like,
you
not
change
always
the
true,
rules,
yeah.
because like if you change the rules, like there's no limits to things. Like certain things have rules for a reason. Like rules are there for like so that you won't go like and do whatever you want. Like I know Thoreau's saying you should go do whatever you want, but like that's not always the good thing, because like it could like hurt someone else that you're not intending to.
Sahil likes the game.
Rules aren't
Right?
rules.
I don't like.
You don't want to break any rules.
So
No,
Sahil,
I do want to break rules.
I think
Like, I
Sahil,
don't like
I think
having
it's
that.
important to value. I think it's important to value that idea, though, right? Because what Sahil's basically arguing is like desperation be damned. Like I like the game, right? Like I might end up unhappy, but I want to keep playing the game because I like the structure of it. I like the path that it gives me.